The black stallion struck the top rail hard enough to split it beneath his chest. Hugh Larkin went backward into the dust. One boot caught under him, his shoulder hit first, and Nightglass came over the broken board with both forelegs slashing at empty air. "Second rope!" someone shouted. A loop rose above the corral. Nell Tarrant stepped between the man holding it and the gate. "Drop it!" The ranch hand stared at her as if the command had come from the fence post. Inside the pen, Hugh dragged himself beneath the lower rail and rolled clear. He clutched his right shoulder, then tried to stand and nearly folded when weight reached his bruised thigh. Nightglass wheeled in a storm of black hide and red dust. His ears lay flat. Foam marked the corners of his mouth where the first rope had burned him. "Mrs. Varden," Hugh called, breathless, "get away from that gate." Nell did not move. 9 days had passed since she married Emmett Varden, 8 since she came to Juniper Gate Ranch. Long enough for the men to call her ma'am. Not long enough for any of them to obey her when a horse threatened blood. The loop remained raised. "I said drop it." The hand holding the rope looked toward Emmett. So did every other man in the yard. Emmett stood beside the broken rail, broad through the shoulders, one hand resting near the gate latch. He had not reached for the rope tied to his own saddle. He had not shouted over her. His gaze moved from Nell to the stallion's feet, then to Hugh, who had managed to sit upright against the fence. "Lower it, Tom," Emmett said. The rope fell into the dirt. Nightglass charged the far side of the pen and turned so sharply his left hind hoof slid beneath him. He recovered without going down, but Nell saw the instant before he pushed away. His ribs tightened, his hip drew inward, not lameness, protection. "Clear the rail," she said. Hugh wiped dust from his mouth. "That horse has put down 3 men. Then he knows what men bring. He knows he can win." Nell watched Nightglass circle again. Each time someone moved near his left side, he shortened his stride and drove harder with the right. No one stands against the fence, no coats flapping, no rope above a man's knee. Tom gave a disbelieving laugh. "You mean to talk him tired?" Emmett faced the men, barn wall. "All of you." They moved because he had spoken, though the order had been hers. Nell noticed the difference. She also noticed that Emmett did not come closer to the gate. "How much room?" he asked. "All of it, and Hugh, he stays out." Hugh's mouth tightened. "I can stand. You can bruise in the shade." A few men glanced away to hide smiles. Hugh did not smile, but he let Tom help him toward an overturned feed box near the barn. He moved stiffly, right shoulder held close and one leg dragging half a step behind. Nell took the white ash grooming brush from the pocket of her apron. The handle had been shaped to fit her hand years ago, and the initials JT were burned into the wood near her thumb. Emmett looked at the brush, then at the stallion. "Can you break a wild horse?" he asked. The yard went still again. The question was not cruel. It was worse than cruelty in one respect. It was public. Nell turned her head toward him. His expression gave her no easy answer. Perhaps he wanted to know whether the stories in her letters had been true. Perhaps he wanted to know whether he had brought a useful woman to Juniper Gate, or merely a stranger wearing his name. She tightened her right hand around the ash handle. "No," she said. Tom shifted his boots. Hugh looked up sharply. Nell held Emmett's gaze. "But I can ask him what he is fighting." Emmett lifted the gate latch. "Then ask." He opened it only far enough for her to pass. He did not offer his hand. He did not put a palm at her back. He gave her the space to decide whether to enter. Nell stepped inside. The gate closed behind her. Nightglass saw the movement and came around at once. The hammer of his hooves traveled through the hard ground into her boots. Men drew breath beyond the rail. Nell turned one shoulder toward him and lowered the brush beside her skirt. She did not challenge his eyes. She did not retreat toward the gate. The stallion charged, black chest, white foam, flying dirt. At the last instant, Nell shifted one step to her right. Nightglass altered course. He passed close enough to stir the hem of her dress, then kicked out at nothing behind him. Nell reached for the rail to steady herself. Rough wood tore the base of her right palm. Pain flashed hot across the skin. She left the blood where it was. Nightglass ran another circle, but wider this time. "Come out," Hugh called. "He gave you one chance." Nell kept watching the horse's left side. "He gave himself another road. That is luck." Nightglass turned again. His nostrils flared, his muscles gathered before he reached her, but not toward attack. Toward escape. Nell lowered herself into the dust. A mutter passed through the men. She sat with one knee raised, the brush resting across it, and angled her body away from the stallion. Sitting made her vulnerable. It also removed the pursuit he expected. "No one move," she said. A boot scraped behind the rail. Emmett's voice followed. "Hold where you are." Nightglass reached the far end of the corral and stopped. His head remained high. His breath came in harsh bursts. Nell did not call to him. She placed the brush on the ground beside her and drew it once through the dust, making a soft rasp. His right ear flicked toward the sound. Then the left. She waited. The sun pressed heat against the back of her neck. Blood from her palm darkened one edge of the ash handle. Nightglass shifted his weight. His left hind leg came forward beneath him, guarded even at rest. There was no fresh wound Nell could see, no swelling, only memory written in muscle. She moved the brush another inch. The stallion did not come closer, but he stopped measuring the distance to the gate. That was the first answer. Nell lifted her eyes toward the rail. Emmett had not moved from the place she had given him. His hands hung open at his sides. He was watching her without directing her, waiting to learn what she saw. Their gaze held across the broken board. No trust yet, no promise, only attention without interference. Nightglass lowered his head by the width of a hand. Nell turned the brush in her scraped palm and studied the rigid line of his left flank. "He isn't trying to beat us," she said. "He's waiting for us to hurt him." Nightglass kept one ear turned toward Nell after the words left her mouth. The other tracked the men beyond the rail. She remained seated in the dust, the white ash brush resting across her raised knee, while blood from the scrape on her right palm darkened the wood near the initials JT. The stallion's breathing still came hard, but he no longer drove himself around the pen. That was not trust. It was only the first place fear had failed to send him running. Nell would not ask for more before he offered it. "How long do you mean to sit there?" Hugh called from the feed box. Tom had wrapped his shoulder beneath his shirt and propped his bruised right leg on an overturned bucket. Pain sharpened his voice, though doubt had lived there before the fall. "Until he stops measuring every road out," Nell said. "And if he doesn't, then tomorrow begins with one less bad memory." Hugh glanced toward Emmett, perhaps waiting for him to call the work finished. Emmett stood where Nell had placed him, several paces back from the broken rail. "Mrs. Varden decides when this ends," he said. The words carried without force. No man mistook them. Nell lowered the brush to the dirt beside her and drew it an inch through the dust. Nightglass lifted his head. She stopped. When he settled, she moved it another inch. The stallion did not step closer, but neither did he retreat. His nostrils worked at the dry scent of ash wood, horsehair, and blood from her palm. Minutes passed. Heat pressed down over Juniper Gate until the yard seemed bleached of color. One ranch hand shifted toward the shade. Emmett sent him back with a look. Before his boots crossed the line Nell had set. She noticed, the horse noticed too. Each time the men obeyed, the corral grew quieter. At last Nightglass rested one foreleg. Nell waited through another 10 breaths before rising. His head shot up. She froze halfway. The muscles over his ribs tightened, especially along the left side. She lowered herself again. "He has you trained now," Hugh muttered. Nell did not turn. "Then perhaps he has better sense than we gave him." She tried again after the stallion's breathing eased. This time she rose only to one knee, then stopped. Nightglass watched. No flight. She stood fully and moved away from him instead of closer. His ears followed her. By noon she had crossed the pen 3 times without forcing him to move. Each pass ended before his feet quickened. Emmett brought a bucket of water and set it just inside the gate. He did not enter. "For you," he said. Nell approached the bucket only after Nightglass turned his head aside. She drank from the dipper, then poured a little over the scrape on her palm. The sting made her fingers twitch. Emmett saw it. "Do you need cloth? Later?" He nodded and stepped back. No argument. No reaching for her hand. The refusal remained hers. That small thing stayed with her while the afternoon lengthened. When she returned to the center of the pen, she placed the brush on the ground and withdrew 6 paces. Nightglass stared at the object. A fly landed along his shoulder. He shuddered but held his ground. The ash handle lay pale against the dirt. Nell kept her hands empty and waited. One step, the stallion's hoof sank into soft dust. Then another. He stretched his neck until his breath stirred the worn bristles. The JT faced upward. Her father had carved the handle when she was 14, after she complained that a store-bought brush cut the skin of a nervous mare. He had thinned the wood to fit her hand and told her that any tool which made an animal fear the hand using it was a poor tool. 5 years buried, and he was still speaking through the shape of it. Nightglass sniffed the bristles, lifted his head, and looked at Nell. She approached 1 pace. His weight shifted backward. She retreated 2. Hugh made a doubtful sound. "You lost him." "No," Nell said. "I showed him retreat works." Another quarter-hour passed before she tried again. This time Nightglass allowed her within arm's reach. She held the brush low where he could see it. His neck stiffened when she raised it. Nell lowered it at once. "You had your chance," Tom said from the barn wall. "No," she replied. "I kept the next one." When the brush rose again, Nightglass trembled but did not leave. Nell touched the bristles to the top of his shoulder. 1 stroke. No more. She stepped away before he needed to ask. The yard released a breath all at once. Tom edged closer to the rail. "Do it again." "No." He stood. He stood once. Tom looked toward Emmett. "Boss?" Emmett pointed back toward the barn wall. She said no. Tom obeyed. Nell met Emmett's gaze across the pen. Morning had placed a question in it. Now he was not asking whether she could control the stallion. He was learning what she considered enough. That difference mattered more than praise. Hugh brought a plain rope halter from the tack room near mid-afternoon. He carried it low, without swinging the loop, and set it over the rail. "You will need this if you mean to lead him before dark." His tone still held skepticism, but no mockery. Nell inclined her head. "Thank you." She let Nightglass inspect the halter as he had inspected the brush. At first, the rope alone made him raise his head. Nell laid it beside the brush and walked away. Later, she lifted it. Later still, she touched it to his neck. Each time, fear tightened his body. She removed the pressure before his feet moved. The sun had begun its slow descent toward the mesa when Nightglass allowed the loop over his nose. Nell did not pull it tight. She left slack enough that he could lower his head without meeting resistance. Hugh rose from the feed box despite the stiffness in his thigh. "You have him." Nell gathered the lead loosely. "No, I have permission to stand here." She turned 1 shoulder away and took a step. Nightglass remained where he was. Nell waited. A meadowlark called beyond the cattle pasture. Dust warmed through the soles of her boots. Then the rope shifted. Nightglass followed. 1 step, 2. On the 6th, Nell stopped. The stallion stopped behind her, the lead hanging in a soft curve between them. The sun touched the distant mesa in a red-gold line. No rope drew tight. No saddle came from the barn. No man climbed the rail. Nell turned, removed the halter, and stepped away. Nightglass stood watching her, free of everything she had placed on him. Tom laughed once in disbelief. "Put it back. Let us see whether he'll do it again." "The work is finished," Emmett said. Nell carried the halter to Hugh and placed it in his hands. 48 hours, water and feed only. No ropes, no blankets. No one climbs into that pen to test what he remembers. Hugh looked at the halter, then at Nightglass. "You think he will remember?" "He will remember whether we keep our word." She stepped through the gate. Her scraped right palm made the latch awkward, so she handed the ash brush to Emmett without looking away from the stallion. Their fingers met over the worn handle. Warm skin against tender skin. Emmett released first and gave the brush back as soon as the gate was secure. The touch lasted no longer than it needed to. That was why she felt it afterward. Outside the rail, one of the hands shook dust from a folded saddle blanket. The cloth cracked open in the air. Nightglass screamed. He hurled himself toward the far fence, twisted, and struck toward his own left flank, as if the blanket had touched him from yards away. Every man stopped, Nell's attention fixed on the rigid line beneath the stallion's ribs. Before anyone spoke, hoofbeats sounded on the road from Lantern Mesa. A rider came beneath the Juniper Gate arch carrying a sealed letter. Cyrus Bell would inspect the ranch's horse lot in 6 days. The letter promised 6 days. Cyrus Bell arrived the next morning. Nell saw his wagon beneath the Juniper Gate arch, while she stood outside Nightglass's pen changing the cloth around her right palm. The scrape had closed, but the new skin pulled when she bent her fingers. Inside the corral, the stallion had hay, water, and the 48 hours of peace she had required. No rope had crossed the rail. No man had tested whether yesterday's 6 steps still belonged to him. Belle's wagon carried 2 polished saddles, rolled blankets, a leather folio, and a strip of scarlet felt bright enough to catch the eye from across the yard. A thin boy rode behind on a narrow sorrel. He could not have been more than 17. Nightglass lifted his head before the wheels stopped. His body tightened through the left side. Nell tied the cloth around her palm and crossed the yard. Hugh Larkin was already near the barn, moving stiffly but upright. His bruised shoulder remained bound beneath his shirt, and his right leg dragged half a beat when he turned. Emmett came from the ranch office, with Belle's letter folded in one hand. "You said 6 days," he called. Belle stepped down from the wagon without haste. He was lean, clean-shaven, and dressed in a dark coat that had gathered less dust than the road ought to have given it. "The buyers come in 6 days," he said. "I came to learn whether they would be wasting the journey." His attention passed Emmett and settled on Nell, and whether the report from yesterday had grown in the telling. "Which report?" Nell asked. "That Emmett Varden's bride gentled a range stallion with a hairbrush, grooming brush." Belle smiled. "I expect the horse values the distinction. He values many distinctions men ignore." Behind the wagon, the boy dismounted and began unfastening the tailgate. "Asa," Belle said, "unnut the inspection tack." Asa Pritchard lifted one saddle, carried it toward the office, then returned for the folded scarlet pad beneath it. The instant his hands closed around the felt, Belle caught his wrist. "Keep that folded," Asa froze. "Yes, sir. Do not shake it open. Do not drag it. Carry it as it lies." Nell watched the boy gather the pad against his chest. A narrow leather keeper held it, folded twice. Stamped into the keeper were the characters B-17. 4 shallow dents marked one edge in a straight line. Asa noticed her looking and turned the folded side inward. Nightglass struck the dirt once inside his pen. Belle glanced toward the sound. "That the celebrated animal?" "That is Nightglass," Emmett said. "He is resting. From walking behind a woman, from learning that not every hand means harm." Belle looked at Nell again. "A bride with parlor patience may impress ranch hands. Buyers ask whether a horse can carry weight. That horse will not carry weight in 6 days. Then he is not part of the lot. He never was." Belle shifted his gaze to Emmett, as if Nell had ceased to be part of the trade. "Your provisional agreement calls for 12 conditioned horses." "It calls for 12 sound horses," Emmett said. Nightglass was not counted. Yet every man between this ranch and Lantern Mesa is talking about him. A black stallion led by a bride before sundown. That brings buyers, unless the story shrinks when seen in daylight. Nell kept her voice even. "You may see him from outside the pen. I inspect horses with my hands." "Not that one." Belle's eyebrows rose. "Your husband owns the horse, and I decide when the horse is ready." The yard quieted. Hugh shifted his weight off his injured leg. Asa stood beside the wagon with B-17 pressed against his coat. Belle turned toward Emmett with the patient expression of a man waiting for another man to correct his wife. Emmett did not. "Nell has charge of conditioning," he said. Belle's amusement faded. "Since when?" Hugh's head came up. Emmett stepped toward the wagon. "She sets the handling schedule. She decides when a horse may be saddled or shown. Any man working the pens answers to her judgment there." Belle studied him. "You would place a commercial lot under the authority of a woman you met 11 days ago." 10 days married," Nell said. 11 since we met." Belle glanced at her. "That does not improve the arrangement. It was not meant to." Emmett folded the letter once more. "You came to inspect my ranch, Belle. Do that. You did not come to count the days of my marriage." Belle allowed the rebuke to pass, though the skin along his jaw tightened. "My buyers prefer familiar equipment. Familiar tack removes excuses." He gestured toward B-17. "Put it with the rest." Asa carried the folded pad toward the office. A gust came through the open rear window and pushed it inward with a dry clap. The boy startled and nearly dropped the felt. Hugh swore under his breath. "That latch again." He crossed the room slowly, favoring his thigh, and pressed the window shut with both hands. bent in the spring storm. It catches if you lift it hard, but it does not seat clean. Asa watched Hugh force the latch into place. "I can fix it," the boy offered. "Not today," Hugh said. "Set the pad on the isolation peg. Keep it apart from our blankets." Belle's voice came from the doorway. "Put it with the inspection tack." Nell stepped closer. "It stays separate." "On what grounds?" "Nightglass reacts to it from across the yard." Belle laughed softly. "The horse saw red felt, perhaps. Or perhaps he smelled something, or remembered something I do not know yet." "Then you admit you are guessing. I am observing without pretending the answer came first." Emmett looked at Asa. "Isolation peg." The boy obeyed. B-17 hung folded, keeper intact, several feet from the ranch blankets. Belle opened the leather folio he carried and drew out a provisional delivery receipt. "Sign for the tack. The buyers come on the 3rd of September. 12 horses, sound feet, quiet under saddle. No delay because your bride finds fault with wool." "Felt," Asa said before he seemed able to stop himself. Belle turned his head. The boy lowered his eyes. "Take the empty boxes to the wagon," Belle said. Asa left at once. Nell watched him go. Fear did not always make a person run. Sometimes it taught stillness so complete that men mistook it for obedience. Belle tapped the receipt against the desk. "My brokerage brought these buyers to Lantern Mesa. Every horse lot routed through me earns its place on their books. A ranch that sells around the man who opened the road may find the road closed next season." "Meaning?" Emmett asked. "Meaning direct sales make buyers cautious. They prefer a broker whose word carries from here to Green River Station. If Juniper Gate fails this inspection, the next lots go through me. If you choose to ignore that, you may discover how few men travel 16 miles for a rancher's private assurance." The threat was not dramatic. That made it more dangerous. Belle did not own the railroad, the buyers, or the law. He owned habit, introductions, and the fear of being left outside trade. Nell saw Emmett understand the price. His face did not show it, but his thumb rested against the fold of Belle's letter where the paper had softened. Belle held out the receipt. Emmett read it beside the desk. Then he reached for a pencil. Beneath the listed tack and delivery number B-17, he wrote another line. Belle leaned forward. "What are you adding?" "No horse is to be ridden in supplied tack without Nell Tarrant's approval." Belle's mouth thinned. "Varden." Emmett signed below the sentence. "You wanted my name." He turned the paper and offered the pencil. "Now you know its terms." Refusing would expose Belle's objection to a safety condition. Accepting would place Nell's authority inside the agreement he meant to control. Belle read the added line again. At last he signed beneath it. "You are staking a great deal on a brush and 6 steps." "No," Emmett said. "I am staking it on judgment." Praise after success had never impressed Nell. Men praised good hands when a frightened mare loaded, a colt accepted a bit, or a buyer paid more than expected. Praise cost nothing. Emmett had done something else. He had placed her judgment on paper before the man who could damage his trade. That did not make trust complete. It gave trust a place to begin. Belle closed his folio. 6 days. If the lot fails, the buyers return to me. After that, Juniper Gate may train horses for church picnics. He turned toward the wagon. Asa climbed onto the sorrel without meeting anyone's eyes. Belle mounted behind him and rode beneath the arch. Nell walked to Nightglass's rail. The stallion stood at the far end of the pen, watching the scarlet edge of B-17 through the office doorway. She stepped onto the lower board to see his feet more clearly. When she climbed down, Emmett offered his hand. He did not catch her arm or assume she needed him. His palm weighted beneath hers. Nell placed her wrapped right hand in his left. His grip steadied her without closing over her fingers. The instant both boots touched the ground, he released her. Nell turned toward the office. B-17 remained folded on the isolation peg. The rear window appeared shut. Along the pad's edge, 4 shallow dents sat in a straight line. The 4 dents remained in Nell's mind after Belle's wagon disappeared beyond the Juniper Gate arch. By the next morning, B-17 still hung folded from the isolation peg inside the ranch office, its leather keeper intact and its scarlet edge bright against the dim wall. No one had unfolded it. No one had moved it nearer Nightglass. Yet the stallion watched the office doorway as if the pad could cross the yard by itself. Nell stood outside his pen with the white ash brush in her left hand. The scrape across her right palm had nearly closed, though the skin pulled when she bent her fingers. Hugh Larkin leaned against the rail several feet away, his bruised shoulder bound beneath his shirt, and his right leg still stiff enough to slow him on turns. Emmett waited behind them with 2 folded blankets over one arm. "Gray first," Nell said. Hugh took the plain wool and held it low. "Open it once. No snap." He unfolded the blanket. Nightglass raised his head. His nostrils widened, but his feet stayed planted. "Close it." Hugh obeyed. Again, the wool opened and closed with a soft drag of fabric. Nightglass shifted his weight, then lowered his head by an inch. Nell entered the pen with the brush visible at her side. She approached until the stallion tightened through his ribs, then retreated before he moved. On the third approach, he allowed 1 stroke along his shoulder. On the fourth, 2. Nell stopped there. "He can stand more," Hugh said. She stepped away. "That does not mean he owes it." Emmett passed Hugh the second cloth. It was scarlet but old and faded from years of ranch use, thinner than B-17 and patched at one corner. Nightglass saw the color and lifted his head sharply. Nell watched his feet. "Open it slowly." Hugh spread the cloth. The stallion took 1 backward step. His muscles tightened, but he did not wheel or strike. Nell turned 1 shoulder away and lowered the brush. Nightglass remained where he was. Hugh closed the cloth and opened it again. This time the stallion only watched. "So it is not the color," Emmett said. "Not the color alone." Nell left the pen and latched the gate. "Bring B-17 folded." Hugh's mouth tightened. "Bell said that pad belongs with the inspection tack." "It does. We are inspecting his reaction to it. If the horse damages it, he will not touch it." Hugh looked toward Emmett. Emmett did not answer for Nell. He only said, "Bring it as she asked." Hugh crossed to the office. The rear window stood shut, though the warped frame left a narrow line of daylight along one corner. He pressed the latch with his thumb before lifting B-17 from the isolation peg. The pad remained folded beneath its leather keeper. He carried it outside at arm's length. Nightglass saw it before Hugh reached the rail. The stallion's head came up so fast. The halter rope hanging outside the gate trembled against its peg. His left hind leg drew beneath him. A hard shiver traveled over his flank. "Stop there," Nell said. Hugh stood 20 feet from the pen. Nightglass turned until his right shoulder faced the pad, and his left side angled away. His breathing quickened. The faded scarlet cloth still hung over the rail, only a few yards from him. He ignored it. Nell asked Hugh to move 3 paces to the left. Nightglass moved 3 paces to the right. Hugh changed direction. The stallion changed with him, keeping B-17 in sight while guarding his left ribs. "He knows that pad," Hugh said. "He fears something connected to it. Same thing." "No." Nell kept her eyes on Nightglass. Knowing the difference is the difference between an answer and an accusation. She had Hugh return B-17 to the office. As soon as the scarlet edge disappeared through the doorway, Nightglass's breathing began to ease. Nell entered the pen again. The stallion allowed the brush along his neck, then across the top of his shoulder. She did not touch his back or left ribs. By noon the question had narrowed. Nightglass did not fear every blanket. He did not fear scarlet cloth by itself. He feared B-17. What Nell did not know was why. The next answer came from another horse. A sorrel filly threw her head each time Hugh lifted a bridle toward her ears. Tom called the mare spoiled and reached for a twitch. Nell stopped him with one look. "Hold the bridle still." She ran her fingers beneath the crown piece and found a dry burr, caught where the leather met the filly's mane. The points had pressed into the skin each time the strap rose. Nell removed it and handed it to Tom. "Try again." The filly lowered her head on the second attempt. Tom turned the burr between his fingers. "That little thing? Pain does not measure itself by what embarrasses a man." Hugh made a sound that might have been a laugh, then disguised it as a cough. Later, Emmett brought his bay gelding from the water trough for the afternoon ride. The horse hollowed his back when Hugh tightened the girth. Nell noticed before the leather reached its usual hole. "Stop!" Hugh's hand froze. He has worn this rig for months. He has also built muscle through the chest. Nell slid 2 fingers beneath the strap near the elbow. The buckle sat too close and pulled the girth forward. Use the longer one. This one still fastens. Fastening is not fitting. Hugh glanced at Emmett. Emmett loosened the girth himself. Which one? Nell pointed to a wider strap hanging from the rack. He changed it without defense or complaint. The bay exhaled and stopped hollowing. Emmett ran a hand along the horse's shoulder. How long has he been telling us? Long enough to expect no answer. Emmett looked toward Hugh. The shorter girth stays off him. Hugh nodded. No argument. That evening, the supper table held beef stew, dried apples, and the horse list Bell expected to see. Hugh named 12 geldings he considered steady. Emmett heard him through, pencil poised above the paper. Then he turned to Nell. Which ones stand behind their work? Hugh's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. Nell drew the list closer. 2 names had already troubled her. 10 may be ready, not 12. Which 2? The roan with the white fetlock is sore through the back. The dun gelding steps short after a hard day. Neither should carry buyer weight in 6 days. Hugh set down his spoon. They worked cattle last week. That proves they endured work last week. Bell's agreement calls for 12. Then Bell's agreement asks for 2 unsound horses. The room held the scrape of wind against the shutters. Emmett drew a line through both names. We show 10 unless they improve. Hugh stared at the paper. Bell will call that difficult. Emmett set the pencil down. Then difficult is what we will be. The words were plain enough to be believed. After supper, Emmett carried the marked list toward the office. Dust streaked one sleeve where the bay gelding had rubbed against him. Nell followed with 2 empty cups, then stopped beside him beneath the porch lamp. Before she could reason herself out of it, she lifted her left hand and brushed the dust from his sleeve. 1 stroke, nothing required it. Emmett went still. He did not catch her wrist or turn toward her body. He let the touch remain only what she had offered. Nell lowered her hand. The longer girth was the right choice, he said. I know. A faint line appeared beside his mouth. I thought you might. Hoofbeats sounded on the road before either could say more. A rider from Lantern Mesa handed Emmett a folded notice bearing Cyrus Bell's name. Bell required every piece of supplied tack to appear at the inspection, including B-17. Nell read the line twice. It goes under lock, she said, until we know what it does to him. Emmett carried the pad from the isolation peg to the ranch office. Hugh watched while he placed B-17 on a wall hook, still folded and keeper intact. Emmett locked the door and handed Hugh the only key. Hugh pressed the warped rear window shut with both hands, forcing the bent latch into place. It will hold, he said, if no one lifts it. Nell stood outside the office and looked toward Nightglass's pen. The stallion could not see the pad through the wall. He could not smell it from that distance through closed wood and glass. Yet as the office door locked, Nightglass twisted, bared his teeth, and bit hard at the hair over his own left flank. By dawn, Nightglass had stopped biting at his flank, but he would not stand with his left side toward the ranch office. Nell watched him from outside the rail, while Hugh Larkin unlocked the door with the only key. B-17 still hung from the wall hook, folded beneath its leather keeper. The rear window remained pressed shut. Nothing appeared disturbed. That answered one question and sharpened another. The pad had not moved. The horse's fear had. Leave it where it is, Nell said. Hugh locked the office again and returned the key to his pocket. His right leg no longer dragged, though stiffness still caught him when he turned too quickly. Bell will want it at the stockyard. Bell may want the moon tied behind his saddle. The pad stays here. Emmett stood beside the wagon with the inspection letter folded inside his coat. We are going to discuss horses, not carry them today. Nell looked toward Nightglass. No one enters his pen while we are gone. Hugh nodded. Water and hay. Nothing else. And no one opens that office. Hugh touched the key through his vest. Not without you. The road to Lantern Mesa took nearly 3 hours by wagon. Late August heat settled over eastern Utah before they crossed the first mile, and dust rose behind the rear wheels in a pale ribbon. Nell sat beside Emmett with her white ash brush wrapped in cloth inside the valise at her feet. She did not need it in town. She had brought it because leaving it behind, near Bell's scarlet pad, felt like yielding the only object in the matter that had never asked a horse to endure pain. Emmett drove without filling the road with talk. When the wagon dropped into a rut, His sleeve brushed hers and moved away with the sway of the bench. "You said Bell's buyers matter to the autumn note," Nell said. "How much? The cattle cover most of it. Most is not an amount." He kept his eyes on the team. The horse lot was meant to cover the rest and leave enough to hold wages through winter. If the lot fails, I sell cattle earlier than I should, or part of the southern pasture. The winter range, yes. Nell watched the sage pass. "And still you wrote my judgment into his receipt." "I meant what I wrote. Meaning it when the cost is ink is easier." Emmett's jaw tightened, not in anger but recognition. The wagon struck another stone. Their knees met beneath the edge of the seat blanket. Neither moved. "Then watch what I do when the cost is land," he said. Lantern Mesa's stockyard stood beyond the livery, its plank fences darkened by years of dust, sweat, and rain. Two men in city-cut coats examined a gray gelding near the loading chute. Several ranchers leaned along the outer rail. Cyrus Bell stood among them with a ledger under one arm. Asa Pritchard held the gelding's lead. The boy saw the Juniper Gate wagon and lowered his gaze. Bell smiled. "Varden, I wondered whether your bride had forbidden travel along with saddle blankets." Emmett tied the team at the hitch rail. "She decides what enters my training pens." A narrow distinction in a new marriage. Nell stepped down before Emmett could offer a hand. "You show a powerful interest in our household for a horse broker." One buyer turned toward her. He was older silver beginning at his temples, his boots polished beneath the dust. "This is Mrs. Varden," Bell answered before Nell could, the celebrated gentler of wild stallions. "I have never called myself celebrated," Nell said. "Other people's exaggerations are not my trade." Bell opened his ledger. "Your trade appears to be delay. 12 conditioned horses were promised." 12 sound horses," Emmett said. 10 are ready for preliminary inspection. 2 are not." "Mrs. Varden's judgment?" "Mine," after hearing hers. Bell glanced toward the buyers. "There. A ranch lot reduced by domestic caution before we have seen a single back under saddle." Nell looked at the gray gelding beside Asa. The animal's mouth was dry, no drugged heaviness in the eyes. Bell was baiting her toward a defense. She did not take it. "You asked us here," she said. "Ask your business question." Bell closed the ledger. "Very well. Did you know Nightglass before you arrived at Juniper Gate?" "No." "Did you work him before the ranch hands watched you enter the pen?" "No." "Did you give him laudanum, chloral, or anything else to quiet him?" "No." One rancher shifted at the rail. Bell raised his voice enough for all of them. "A bride arrives from nowhere. Within days, a range stallion follows her before sundown. Either we have witnessed a miracle, or a woman has arranged a performance to secure her place." Heat rose beneath Nell's collar. Her voice remained level. Nightglass ate hay and drank water where the ranch hands could see him. No drug touched him. 6 men watched every step. 6 men paid by your husband. Emmett moved once, placing himself at the edge of Bell's path as the broker stepped closer. He did not block Nell from view. "State your claim without crowding her." Bell stopped. The older buyer lifted one hand. "We came to decide whether Juniper Gate can present a manageable horse, not whether its owner has married wisely." 4 days, the second buyer said. "Bring one horse that stands for ordinary tack, walks and trots under control, and remains steady around other stock. Do that and we discuss the larger lot." Nell answered before Bell could shape the choice. "Nightglass will not be saddled in 4 days." Bell gave a short laugh. "Then the famous horse proves nothing. He was never part of the 12. He is the reason these men rode from Green River Station." Asa's fingers tightened around the gelding's lead. The buyer noticed. Asa looked toward Bell. "Nothing, sir." "Speak," the buyer said. Asa swallowed. "Mr. Bell told me the red pad had to stay folded. That's all." Bell's head turned. "Take the sorrel." The boy went pale. "Sir, you heard me. Finish the errand I gave you." Now. Asa tied off the gray gelding, crossed to the livery rail, and mounted the narrow sorrel. He rode out of Lantern Mesa without looking back. Nell watched until dust swallowed him beyond the freight sheds. "What errand?" she asked. Bell opened his ledger again. "My stable boy's business is not yours. You made it ours when you delivered B-17 under receipt. A clean pad stays folded. That is the whole mystery." "Then why insist on that exact one?" "Because my buyers require common equipment." Belle turned to Emmett. "You can end this without 4 days of theater. Sign future horse lots through my brokerage, and I will waive the inspection deposit if your bride's stallion fails." "Nightglass is not hers," Emmett said, "and he is not for your leverage." "Then present him." The older buyer looked at Emmett. "Can he be shown safely in hand?" Nell felt the answer gathering before Emmett spoke. Financial need had entered the yard. Now she would learn what his promise weighed. "If Nell judges him ready," Emmett said, "we will show him in hand." Belle smiled as though he had won half the ground. Nell turned to Emmett. "In hand is not the same as ready for a public yard." "I know. Do you?" The question passed between them without privacy. Emmett did not flinch. "I will not put a saddle on him without your approval. Public pressure can harm him without leather." "Then tell me what he can bear." "Today? Nothing here." The buyer studied her, then nodded once. 4 days, one manageable horse. It need not be the stallion, but if Juniper Gate built its reputation on him, people will ask why he stayed home. The meeting ended without agreement. On the wagon road back, Emmett held the reins while late sun burned red along the mesas. Their knees touched again when the bench narrowed beneath a turn. This time the contact remained through several miles. Not comfort, not reconciliation. A physical fact neither used against the other. "You chose Nightglass because they wanted him," Nell said. "I chose not to surrender the choice to Belle." "That is not the same as protecting the horse." "No." The admission came without defense. "But I said in hand only if you approve. Men hear the promise before they hear the condition." "Then I will make the condition louder." Nell looked ahead at the road. "Do not make me defend him from you." Emmett's hands tightened once on the reins. "You will not have to." They reached Juniper Gate after sundown. Hugh met them beneath the arch with the office key still in his pocket. "No one entered," he said. Emmett unlocked the door. B-17 hung where they had left it, folded, keeper intact. The rear window appeared shut. Nightglass stood in the north pen with his head low, his left side turned away from them. He did not sweat. He did not strike. When Nell approached the rail, he stepped back before she lifted the brush. "Leave him," she said. No one argued. She went to her separate room with unease following harder than fatigue. Before dawn, a shout tore through the ranch house. Nell ran into the yard barefoot beneath her skirt. Nightglass stood beneath the paling stars, drenched in sweat and trembling so violently the rail shook against his shoulder. Then he twisted and kicked toward his own left ribs. Nightglass struck at his left ribs again, harder this time, and nearly lost his footing. Nell reached the pen before anyone else. Dawn had not yet cleared the eastern ridge. The yard lay blue with cold light, every rail and bucket reduced to shape. Nightglass's black coat shone wet beneath it. Sweat streamed from his neck, though the air held no heat, and tremors ran through his body in sharp waves. "No ropes," Nell said. Hugh Larkin had come from the bunkhouse pulling on his coat, the key to the ranch office already in one hand. Tom stood beside him with a halter. He lowered it. Emmett crossed the yard barefoot in trousers and an unbuttoned shirt, his boots forgotten on the porch. He took in the stallion's breathing, the twisted posture, Nell's bare feet in the dirt. "What do you need?" "Space, warm water, clean cloth, the ash brush." Emmett turned. "Tom, water, Hugh, cloth." "No one enters unless she asks." Nell eased through the gate with the white ash brush held low. Nightglass wheeled from her. His left side stayed bent away, but pain had narrowed his choices. He no longer watched the whole pen. He watched the place beneath his own ribs as though an enemy lived there. Nell stopped well beyond kicking range. "Easy," she said, not because the word would calm him, but because her voice could remain the same when everything else had changed. She waited until his feet settled. Then she moved one pace and withdrew two, the old pattern, a promise he already knew. Nightglass allowed her closer by inches. When she reached his shoulder, she touched the brush to his neck once and removed it. His skin jumped. Nell did not follow the movement. Another stroke. A pause. By the time Tom returned with water, she had worked down the shoulder far enough to see the left ribs without asking the horse to turn. 4 dark points marked the hair in a straight line. Fresh. "Emmett." He came only as far as the rail. "I see them. Bring the lamp lower." Hugh carried it to the gate and held it beneath the top board. Nell parted the damp hair with 2 fingers. The punctures were small, no wider than a nail point, but the skin around them had swollen. One had crusted with a thin bead of blood. Nightglass flinched before she touched the nearest edge. "Not deep," she said. "Deep enough." Emmett's voice had gone flat. Nell cleaned around the marks with warm water while the stallion trembled. She did not press the wounds. She let the cloth pass near them, then away until he stopped expecting a new stab each time her hand returned. "Nothing touches his back," she said. "No blanket, no girth, no saddle, no demonstration." Emmett answered at once. "There will be no demonstration." The certainty in his voice steadied her more than she wanted it to. She finished the first cleaning, backed out of the pen, and latched the gate. Only then did she realize blood had started at the edge of the healing scrape in her right palm, where she had gripped the brush too hard. Emmett saw it, but did not reach for her hand. "The office," Nell said. Hugh held up the key. "Been on me since we left yesterday, slept in my vest. Open the door." They crossed the yard together. The lock turned without resistance. Inside, B-17 hung from the wall hook where they had left it, folded beneath the leather. The receipt lay in the contract drawer. Nothing on the desk had been disturbed. Hugh stared at the pad. "No one came through that door." "I believe you." Nell did not touch B-17. She looked instead at the rear window. The latch appeared shut. A narrow stripe of mourning showed along the warped lower corner. "Lamp." Hugh brought it close. Dust coated the sill except for one clean sweep near the latch, no wider than a hand. The wood beneath was freshly scraped. Nell lifted the window without touching the latch. It opened half an inch. Hugh swore. "I pressed it closed." "You did." She pushed the frame outward with 2 fingers. The bent metal lifted free of its catch. "It does not need a key." Emmett moved to the outside path. "There is a mark here." Beneath the window, a boot had scuffed through the dry crust of earth. Not enough for a print. Enough to show weight had landed there. Nell found a short scarlet fiber caught on a splinter beneath the sill. She did not pull it loose. "Hugh, bring paper. Draw the window, the scrape, and where that thread sits. Do not move it yet." Hugh looked from her to B-17. "You think someone took the pad out and returned it?" "I think someone used the window. I think Nightglass has 4 fresh punctures. I think there are 4 dents along that fold. That is all I know." She crossed to the north sorting lane. The side gate stood closed, but the rawhide tie had been knotted backward from Hugh's usual turn. Nell had watched him secure it often enough to know. "Who tied this last?" Hugh came behind her.
"I did, yesterday morning. This is not your knot."
His face tightened. "No." The lane was narrow enough to hold a horse between rails without roping it. If Nightglass had been driven inside, one man could pressure the front gate while another worked from the side. The thought arrived whole and sickening. Nell refused to call it fact. "Do not change the knot," she said. "Leave everything." Tom came running from the bunkhouse. "Boss, Bell sent a rider before sunup." Emmett turned. "Why?" "Looking for Asa. Says the boy stole tack and papers, then ran." Nell's gaze went to the window. "When did Bell learn he was missing?" Tom blinked. "Rider," said Bell, noticed last night, before we reported anything from here." "We had not reported anything," Hugh said. "Then Bell knew Asa did not return to him." Emmett's face hardened. "Or Bell wants us to believe the boy acted alone. We do not know that either." Nell went back to the office. She took a length of clean twine and 4 pieces of charcoal. Without touching the pad's hem, she marked the spacing between the 4 shallow dents along the folded edge. Then she carried the twine to Nightglass's pen. Hugh stood outside the rail while she aligned the marks by sight against the punctures beneath the left ribs. The spacing was close, not perfect. The stallion shifted before she could hold the angle. "Consistent," she said. "Not proof." Hugh exhaled through his nose. "You speak as though Bell's lawyer is behind you." "I speak as though a horse was hurt, and the truth deserves better than our anger." Emmett had returned to the office. When Nell joined him, he held Hugh's key in his palm. "This is yours now. The office belongs to you. The evidence does not belong to me." He set the key on the desk rather than putting it into her hand. "Choice left open. No horse is prepared for Bell. No buyer touches Nightglass. No one opens that pad without you." Nell looked at the key. Written authority had been easy to believe while the cost was ink. Now the ranch faced a buyer deadline, a threatened horse lot, and perhaps the loss of winter range. Emmett had stopped the work before she asked twice. It mattered. It did not erase what waited outside. "He was safe here," she said. "I thought he was safe here. So did I. That is worse." Emmett accepted the words without defending his ranch. Nell's throat tightened. Men value gentleness when it makes an animal useful. They praise patience until patience costs money. Then they call pain necessary. Her right hand curled despite the split skin. "I know what happens to women who are useful only while they make hard things easier." Emmett stood across the desk, close enough to reach her, and still not reaching. "I will not ask you to make this easier. You already chose night glass for the buyers." "Yes." No excuse followed. "I was wrong." The directness struck harder than argument would have. Nell looked toward the open office door. Hugh and Tom remained outside, giving them privacy without being told. Emmett raised his arms slightly. Not enough to close around her, only enough to offer a place. He waited. Nell crossed the distance. She entered his embrace on her own. His arms settled around her with measured strength. One hand rested between her shoulders, nowhere near the wounds on her palm or the fear she had not named fully. He did not tell her the horse would recover. He did not promise the ranch would survive. He held her until her breathing no longer matched night glasses. Then he released her when she stepped back. Hoofbeats approached beneath the Juniper Gate arch. A rider handed Emmett a folded notice bearing Cyrus Bell's seal. Bell claimed breach of the provisional agreement and demanded compensation unless the September 5th showing proceeded. Nell read it once. Then she picked up the office key and the seam knife from Hugh's desk. B-17 still hung folded against the wall, 4 shallow dents aligned beneath its scarlet edge. "We know someone came through the window," Emmett said. "We know the pad may fit the wounds," Nell answered. She placed the knife beneath the first loose stitch. "Now we learn what was hidden well enough to make a horse remember it." The seam knife rested beneath the first loose stitch, but Nell did not cut. "Hugh," she said, "bring the receipt." He crossed to the contract drawer and returned with the paper Emmett had signed when Bell delivered the inspection tack. Nell placed it beside B-17 on the work table. The number stamped into the leather keeper matched the number written on the receipt. Emmett read both aloud. Hugh repeated them. Only then did Nell touch the blade to the thread. "You both see where the seam is already open." "I see it," Hugh said. Emmett stood opposite her, his hands flat on the table's edge. "So do I." Nell slipped the knife beneath one slack loop and lifted. The old thread parted without resistance. She cut no farther than the opening required, then used the knife tip to separate the felt. Copper showed in the dark space beneath. Hugh bent closer. "Do not touch it," Nell said. He stopped. Nell widened the loose hem with 2 fingers. 4 short upholstery tacks had been sewn inside the folded edge, heads buried between layers of felt, points aimed outward. Each lay beneath one of the shallow dents she had marked. The room seemed to contract around the table. Emmett's face did not change, but his right hand closed once against the wood. "4," he said. "4," Hugh confirmed. Nell drew the felt apart enough for both men to see the thread securing each tack. None were loose, none fell free. They had been placed to remain hidden until pressure forced the points through. She slid a clean scrap of wood beneath the fold and pressed lightly with the flat of her fingers. One copper point began to rise through the scarlet felt. She released pressure at once. The point disappeared again. Hugh swore under his breath. "That is what marked him." "It could make marks like his," Nell said. "It does not yet tell us who took the pad through the window or who put it against night glass." "Bell supplied it." "Yes, Bell. Ordered Asa to keep it folded." "Yes. Bell sent Asa away before we returned." "Yes." Hugh's frustration sharpened. "How much more do you need?" Nell looked at the 4 tacks. "Enough that anger does not become the weakest part of the truth." Emmett nodded toward the pad. "What now?" "We preserve it." Nell folded no part of the opened hem back into place. She laid B-17 flat on clean canvas with the leather keeper and stamped number visible. Hugh watched while she wrapped the canvas around the outer edges, without covering the exposed seam. Emmett wrote the time, date, and names of the 3 people present on the back of Bell's receipt copy. Nell signed beneath him. Hugh made his mark. "The office key stays with me," Nell said. No one handles the pad unless all three of us are here. Emmett slid the key across the table. Agreed. Outside, Nightglass stood in the north pen with his head low. The swelling beneath his left ribs remained visible even from the rail. Nell carried no blanket toward him. She cleaned the punctures, brushed his neck, and stopped when his skin began to twitch. The stallion breathed more easily than before dawn, but he kept his left side angled away from every human in the yard. Hugh remained beyond the gate. If Belle did this, why risk leaving the pad here, he asked. Nell rinsed the cloth. Because a hidden weapon becomes an accusation only after someone finds it. Until then, it is just equipment. And if Asa acted alone, then Belle will try to make that the whole answer. Hoofbeats sounded beneath the ranch arch before noon. Cyrus Bell rode in without Asa. He carried no ledger this time. The breach notice folded inside his coat. Emmett met him in the yard and did not invite him farther. "You have disturbed Tack in your office," Bell said. "You seem certain of that." "My property was delivered sealed under keeper. I have a right to inspect it." Nell came from the office holding Bell's receipt, not the pad. "The keeper was never sealed. It was buckled. The receipt says nothing about your right to remove Tack after delivery." Bell's gaze moved to the paper, then to her face. "What did you do?" "Opened a loose hem before two witnesses, and found what you put there." Hugh stepped away from the barn wall. "I watched every cut. A foreman protects his wages. My wages do not buy my eyes." Bell ignored him. "Bring me the pad." "No," Nell said. "It stays where it is until a neutral man sees it." Bell dismounted. "Neutral? You married the rancher, opened my tack, and now refuse inspection. That is not neutrality. That is fraud with a wedding ring." Emmett moved between Bell and the office door, leaving Nell a clear line of sight. "Take one more step toward her evidence and you leave without your horse." Bell stopped. "Evidence?" His laugh held no amusement. "You have promoted a household trick into evidence because your bride cannot make a stallion carry a saddle." "Nightglass was hurt with something that left 4 punctures," Nell said. "B-17 contains 4 concealed tacks. The spacing is consistent." "Consistent is not proof. No, it is reason to preserve the object." Bell's eyes narrowed. "Then let us test it before men neither of you employ." "On wood," Nell said, "not on a horse. A pad is made for a horse. That does not entitle you to hurt another one." Bell turned to Emmett. "The Green River buyers will be in Lantern Mesa on September 5th. Present the stallion in hand with neutral tack, and I will submit to inspection of B-17 before witnesses. Refuse, and I press the breach claim, keep the deposit, and advise every buyer on my books that Juniper Gate fabricated sabotage to hide an unmanageable horse." "Nightglass is injured," Nell said. "A horse can walk while healing. He will not be used." "Then your word carries no commercial weight." Bell drew a folded paper from his coat and held it toward Emmett. "A public showing. Neutral yard, neutral tack. No saddle if your wife fears one. Refuse now, and I file the claim before sunset." Emmett did not take the paper. "Leave." Bell held it there. "Your autumn note will not be paid by wounded pride. Leave." Bell's arm lowered. "You have until sundown." He mounted and rode out, taking his threat but not the paper. Nell watched the road dust settle. He knew where to press. "Yes," Emmett said. And he is still leaving." That afternoon, Nell locked B-17 inside the office and carried the key on a cord beneath her dress. Nightglass rested. Hugh kept watch from the shade. The ranch continued around them, but every ordinary sound now seemed to carry the question Bell had left behind. Would Emmett's judgment hold when the cost became land? Near dusk, Nell found him alone in the tack room, studying the list of 10 sound horses. The breach notice lay beside it. "Did he leave another paper?" she asked. "No." "Did you send anyone to Lantern Mesa?" "No." "Then tell me what you are deciding." Emmett set down the pencil. "Whether there is a way to show the truth without using him." Bell did not ask for truth. He asked for Nightglass. "I know." Nell stood close enough to see dust in the lines of his shirt. "My authority cannot exist only until the ranch is afraid." "It does not." "Then say the showing will not happen." Emmett's answer did not come quickly enough. That delay reached her before the words did. "I am trying to save the land and keep faith with you. Those may become different choices. I know." The admission brought them nearer rather than farther apart. Emmett lifted one hand, stopped before touching her, and waited. Nell closed the final inch. Their foreheads met. His breath warmed her cheek. Neither moved toward a kiss. Desire sat between them, undeniable and unfinished. "Does my judgment still stand?" she asked. "Yes, even if it costs the southern pasture?" Emmett's eyes closed briefly. "I am trying to find a way it does not." Nell stepped back. It was not the answer she needed. At sundown, Hugh entered the tack room carrying Bell's paper. Emmett's signature stood beneath the agreement for a September 5th public demonstration. Hugh set Bell's paper on the tackroom table and stepped back. Emmett's signature showed beneath the agreement for a public demonstration on September 5th. Nell read it once. She did not need a second reading. "When?" she asked. "This afternoon," Emmett said, after Bell left. "You signed after telling me my judgment stood. I signed for an in-hand showing with neutral tack, no saddle, no B-17. You signed for Nightglass. I signed for a chance to prove Bell wrong without hurting him." Nell folded the paper along the line of Emmett's name. Her hands remained steady. A public yard, strange horses, buyer's Bell, a horse with 4 fresh punctures who still expects pain from cloth. "I would stop it if he showed fear. He has already shown fear. Then we would not proceed." Hugh moved toward the door. "I will be outside." "Stay," Nell said. "You witness the authority Emmett gave me. You may witness what it was worth." Emmett's jaw tightened. "Do not make Hugh stand inside our marriage. This is not only our marriage. It is the training order you gave before every man on this ranch." She placed the agreement flat again. "Did Bell set the date?" "September 5th. 2 days, yes. And if I refuse, the breach claim goes forward. He keeps the deposit. The buyers may close their books to us. That is a cost, a large one." "It is not an answer." Emmett came around the table but stopped before entering her reach. "Nell, the ranch is mine to keep alive." The words landed with more force because he had not raised his voice. She felt no surprise, only the clean edge of recognition. "You may own the fence," she said. "You do not own my word inside it." His face changed then. Regret came too late to prevent the wound. "That is not what I meant. It is what you used. I am trying to keep men paid and pasture under us. By spending authority you gave me as if it were yours to withdraw. I have not withdrawn it. You signed beneath my refusal." Emmett lifted one hand, perhaps to touch her arm. Nell stepped back. His hand stopped in the air, then lowered. "No comfort. Not now." "I withdraw my approval," she said. "Nightglass is not ready for any public showing. I will not stand beside that demonstration, and no one may tell buyers I do." Hugh nodded once. "Understood." Emmett looked at him. "Hugh, she has charge of the training pens," Hugh said. "You said so." The answer cost him. Nell heard that too. She took the office key from the cord beneath her collar. "B-17 goes with me." Emmett did not object. "Where?" "To Ruth Kersey in Lantern Mesa. Neutral custody, paid lodging, a locked room you do not own." "You are leaving Juniper Gate?" "I am leaving this house until I know whether my refusal has—" "Wait here." "Nell, do not ask me to decide the marriage while you are still defending the act that drove me out of it." That stopped him. She left the tack room and crossed to Nightglass's pen. The stallion stood beneath the shade, lean-to, with his left side turned away from the yard. Swelling still rounded the flesh beneath his ribs. Nell entered with the ash brush and worked only along his neck. When his breathing eased, she asked Hugh to open the passage into the quiet north recovery pen. No rope touched Nightglass. Nell used the familiar pattern of approach and retreat until he chose the gate himself. Once inside, he lowered his head toward the water trough. "No blanket," she told Hugh. "No girth. No public practice. Watch from the bunkhouse after dark. No man goes in merely to see whether he can. I will keep Tom on first watch. You keep the office window as it is. Do not repair the latch until it has been seen by someone outside the ranch." Hugh glanced toward Emmett, then back to her. "Agreed." In her room, Nell packed only what belonged to her. 2 dresses, personal letters, training notebook, travel money, the white ash brush, and the small comb she had carried from Green River Station. The wedding ring remained on her hand. She saw it when she closed the valise. Removing it would have turned pain into declaration. She was not prepared to lie in either direction. B-17 lay inside the ranch office where she had left it, open hem exposed, 4 copper tacks still sewn beneath the scarlet felt. Hugh and Emmett watched while Nell wrapped the outer edges in clean canvas. The keeper and stamped number remained visible. She did not fold the pad shut. She carried it herself to the wagon and placed it beneath the bench within reach of her hand. Tom harnessed the lighter team. "I can drive you," Emmett said. "No, it is 16 miles. I know the road." "Then let Tom drive." Nell considered the distance, the pad, and the fact that dusk would meet them before Lantern Mesa. "Tom may drive. He returns tonight." Emmett accepted even that boundary without argument. As the wagon rolled beneath the Juniper Gate arch, Nell did not look back at the house. She looked toward the north pen. Nightglass stood in the shade with his head raised, watching her leave. Lantern Mesa lamps had begun to burn when Tom stopped beside Ruth Kersey's boarding house. Ruth came to the door in a brown work dress with her sleeves rolled above strong forearms. She listened while Nell explained only what Ruth needed to know. "You are paying for the room?" Ruth asked. "Yes, and the horse pad needs a locked place and a witness to its condition." Ruth brought a lamp to the kitchen table. Nell unwrapped B17 without touching the exposed tacks. Ruth examined the stamped number, the open hem, the 4 copper points, and the unbroken keeper. "Has it been out of your sight since the ranch?" "No." "Did Tom handle it?" "No." Ruth opened a cupboard beside the pantry, cleared one shelf, and set the wrapped pad inside without folding it. She locked the door and placed the key in her apron pocket. "It stays there unless you and I are both present. Thank you." "Do not thank me yet. You owe 75 cents for the room and supper if you want it." Nell placed the coins on the table. Ruth counted them. Charity would have made the room another debt. Payment made it shelter. Tom had barely turned the wagon toward Juniper Gate when hoofbeats and voices rose from the stockyard. A notice had been nailed beside the livery door. September 5th. Public demonstration of the Juniper Gate stallion. Bell's wording, said Nell Tarrant Varden, had declined to stand behind her own methods. Ruth read the notice over Nell's shoulder. "That man wants your absence to testify for him. Then I will decide where my presence speaks." A freight worker carrying a lantern slowed near the door. "Mrs. Varden." He twisted his hat brim. "Ruth said you were asking after Bell's boy." Nell had asked no one yet, but she let the mistake pass. "Have you seen Asa?" "Near the old wool shed beyond the rail siding. 2 nights running. He runs if anyone comes close." "Did Bell's men search there?" they asked. "I told them I had not seen him." Ruth studied the worker. "Why lie?" Boy looked scared. Bell looked angry. After he left, Ruth touched the cupboard key through her apron. "You going after him tonight?" "No. A frightened boy cornered after dark may tell anything to escape." Outside, another rider arrived at the livery. Emmett dismounted, crossed to Bell's notice, and tore it from the wall in one pull. Bell stepped from the stockyard office holding a second copy and the signed agreement. "Tear every notice in town," he called. "Your name remains on this." Emmett crushed the paper in his fist, but could not tear the signature from the contract Bell held. Nell watched from Ruth's doorway. He had followed the damage to Lantern Mesa. Whether he would undo it remained another question. By the time Emmett reached Ruth Kersey's doorway, Nell had already decided he would not be allowed to repair the damage with a private apology. He stood below the porch lamp, with Bell's torn notice crushed in one fist and dust whitening his boots. Across the street, Cyrus Bell remained beneath the stockyard awning, the signed demonstration agreement folded inside his coat. "You rode 16 miles to tear down a piece of paper," Nell said. Emmett opened his hand. The notice had split through Bell's name but not through hers. "I rode here because I signed the paper he is using against you." "That is not the same as knowing what to do next." "No." Ruth stayed inside the doorway, near enough to hear and far enough not to turn the exchange into spectacle. Nell appreciated the discipline. "The demonstration is set for September 5th, she said. 1 day from now." "I know. Bell will fill the yard before noon." "I know that too." "Do you?" Nell kept her voice low. "Because tearing down his notice lets him say you regret the wording. Canceling the agreement tells him you reject the act." Emmett glanced toward the stockyard. Bell had not moved. "Then I will reject it where he cannot pretend otherwise." "When?" "At first light." Nell studied him. "Before Asa speaks?" "Yes, Before we know who entered the office, yes. Before you know whether Bell's breach claim will stand, yes. The answers came without pause now. Nell felt the force of them and refused to confuse force with completion. And if I do not return to Juniper Gate, Emmett's fingers closed around the torn notice. The demonstration still dies. Ruth shifted one shoulder against the doorframe. That sounds like a sentence worth sleeping beside before either of you improves it. She opened the door wider. Mrs. Varden has paid for her room, he inclined his head. I will take a bed at the livery. You will pay them, too. I expect they will insist. Nell almost smiled. Almost. Emmett looked at her once more. May I see the pad? Not tonight. Fair. He crossed the road without asking for anything else. At dawn on September 4th, Lantern Mesa's stockyard smelled of damp dust, manure, coffee, and the sharp iron scent of horses waiting in unfamiliar pens. Bell had summoned more men than the demonstration required. 2 Green River buyers stood near the loading chute. Several ranchers from the surrounding range had gathered along the fence. Bell's second notice remained nailed to the stockyard office. Nell arrived with Ruth at her side. B-17 stayed locked in Ruth's cupboard. The key remained in Ruth's apron pocket. Emmett stood in the center of the yard, holding the original demonstration agreement. Bell spoke before he could. Varden intends to soothe his bride before tomorrow's showing. This is household business dressed as commerce. No, Emmett said, this is commerce. That is why I am speaking here. He turned so the buyers and ranchers could hear him without Bell standing between them. The September 5th demonstration is canceled. Bell's smile held for half a breath. You cannot cancel a signed obligation by announcing regret, then call it breach. A murmur moved along the rail. Emmett continued. Keep the deposit, file the claim. No horse from Juniper Gate will be shown without Nell Tarrant's judgment that the animal is ready. Bell lifted his chin. Your wife has withdrawn because she cannot defend her methods. She withdrew because I overruled the authority I gave her. The yard grew still in a way crowds rarely did. Not silent. Listening. Emmett held up the agreement. I signed this after she said the stallion was injured and not fit for public handling. That was my choice. It was wrong. Bell stepped closer. You are allowing a woman to damage your standing over a horse she cannot control. I damaged my standing when I asked others to trust an authority I would not trust under pressure. Nell felt Ruth's glance touch her and, move away. Bell addressed the buyers. A man who cannot govern his own yard cannot guarantee a horse lot. The older buyer at the chute folded his arms. A man who names his own error before the loss is counted is not common either. Bell's mouth tightened. The deposit is mine. The claim follows. Then follow it, Emmett said. Nightglass does not enter this yard tomorrow. Bell looked toward Nell. And the scarlet pad? In neutral custody, Nell said. Unfolded, open hem visible, 4 tacks untouched. You have no right to hold my property. You delivered it under receipt. It is tied to an injured horse and a disputed agreement. Ruth Kersey witnessed its condition when I arrived. Ruth tapped the cupboard key through her apron. And I have not opened the cupboard since. Bell's eyes cooled. Convenient witnesses. Then bring a justice, Nell said. Bring the sheriff. Bring the buyer who remembers what tack you demanded. But do not bring Nightglass. Bell looked back to Emmett. You understand what happens when buyers close their books. I understand what happens when a ranch asks a wounded animal to pay for a man's fear. Emmett handed the agreement to Nell rather than tearing. You decide where this stays. She took the paper. The old instinct was to give him a reward for choosing correctly at last. A softened voice, a private assurance. She gave him truth instead. This does not repair everything. I know. Would you have canceled if I were only your employee? His answer took longer. That delay mattered because it was honest. I should have. That was not my question. Emmett looked down at the dust between them. I do not know if I would have. I am ashamed of that. Nell folded the agreement and placed it inside her training notebook. It will remain with Bell's receipt when Hugh brings the original. Will you come back? To Juniper Gate? Yes, I will come back to finish the truth. Nothing more is promised. Emmett nodded. No plea, no use of wife, home, or duty. That restraint carried more weight than the apology Bell had tried to make public weakness. The freight worker who had spoken to Nell the previous night waited near the livery until the crowd began to break apart. Then he jerked his chin toward the rail siding. The boy is still near the old wool shed. Nell looked at Emmett. No men after him, agreed. No cornering him, agreed. And you do not speak first. Emmett accepted that too. The abandoned wool shed stood west of the siding, its roof bowed and one wall silvered by years of sun. Nell approached with empty hands. Emmett stopped 30 feet away beside a stack of worn ties. Ruth remained near the road. Asa, Nell called. Belle is not with us. No answer. I will not promise you that truth carries no consequence. I will promise not to put words in your mouth. A board shifted inside. Asa appeared through the broken doorway, pale beneath the dust. Scarlet thread was wound twice around his right thumb, dark where it had cut the skin. His eyes went first to Emmett, then to the open road behind Ruth. Did he send you? Belle? Nell asked. Asa nodded. No, he'll say I stole from him. He already has. The boy flinched. Then it doesn't matter. It matters whether the accusation is true. Asa pressed his thumb into his palm. I did not steal papers. What did you do? His gaze dropped to the dirt. He sent me back to Juniper Gate. Emmett did not move. Nell kept her voice steady. When? After the stockyard. Before your wagon left town. Were you alone? Asa's breath caught. No. Who went with you? Mr. Bell. He took the cutoff. Nell heard Emmett's boot shift against gravel, then become still again. How did you enter the office? She asked. Asa looked at her sharply. You know? I know the rear window was disturbed. The boy stared at the scarlet thread on his thumb. The latch lifts if you push the frame up. You learned that when you delivered B-17. He nodded. Did you take the pad? He took it down. I carried it back. Back from where? Asa closed his eyes. I can't say it all here. Can you say whether it touched night glass? His lips parted, but no sound came. That was answer enough to wound and not enough to prove. Nell did not press him farther. Ruth has a back room. You may sleep there tonight. The door will not be locked. Belle will not be told where you are by us. Will the sheriff take me? I do not know. Will you speak for me? I will speak to what I see and what you tell truthfully. I will not call you innocent before I know what happened. Asa's shoulders lowered, not from relief, but from no longer needing to guess what mercy would cost. All right. Ruth took him toward the boarding house. Emmett waited until the boy was out of hearing. You are returning to the ranch tonight? After Hugh brings the receipt and Ruth secures Asa. May I ask one thing that is not about the ranch? Nell faced him. You may ask? May I kiss you? The request did not erase his mistake. It did not demand forgiveness. It placed the next movement entirely in her hands. Nell closed the distance, caught his coat lapel, and drew him down. Their mouths met once, brief, deliberate. Emmett did not deepen the kiss or close his arms around her. When Nell released his coat, he stepped back. From Ruth's doorway, Asa's voice carried across the road. Mrs. Varden. Nell turned. The boy held up the scarlet thread around his thumb. I did more than carry the pad. I did more than carry the pad. Asa said again when no one answered quickly enough to spare him the words. Nell crossed back toward Ruth's doorway. Emmett followed only as far as the porch post, leaving the boy room to retreat. Ruth opened the door to her back room and lit a second lamp. Inside, she said. All of you who mean to listen. No one who means to frighten him. Asa sat on the edge of a narrow cot with both boots planted as if he expected to run. The scarlet thread remained wound around his right thumb. Nell took the chair nearest the door. Ruth stood beside the washstand. Emmett stayed against the far wall, hands visible and empty. Start with what you saw before B-17 came to Juniper Gate, Nell said. Asa swallowed. Mr. Bell had it at the Lantern Mesa stable. 2 nights before we delivered the tack, he laid it under a saddle tree and hung grain sacks from the stirrup leathers. How many sacks? 2, maybe 40 pounds each. I didn't weigh them. Do not improve what you do not know. I won't. His voice shook, but he looked at her. He pressed the tree down and asked whether the points showed. I said I could see 4 marks in the felt. He told me to keep the pad folded after that. Emmett's jaw tightened. He did not interrupt. Nell asked, Did you see him sew the tacks inside? No, did he tell you why they were there? He said a difficult horse sometimes needed a sharper lesson than a rider could give with his hands. Ruth's mouth flattened. And after he sent you from the stockyard, Asa rubbed his thumb against his palm. I rode east on the sorrel. Mr. Bell stayed to speak with the buyers. I thought maybe he had changed his mind about the errand. What errand did he give you? He told me to wait at the dry wash where the ranch cutoff leaves the main road. Did he join you? Yes. He came fast. Said your wagon would take the long road and we had less than an hour. Nell kept her breathing even. Why did you follow him? He said if I didn't, he would tell the sheriff I stole tack and money from his stable. He had already made me carry papers I wasn't allowed to read. He said no one would believe a stable boy over a contractor. Did you believe him? Yes, no hesitation, no excuse. Only the truth of a frightened 17-year-old who understood how little standing he possessed. Nell nodded toward the thread. Tell us how that happened. Asa looked down at it. We reached Juniper Gate before your wagon. Most of the hands were near the bunkhouse. Mr. Bell tied our horses behind the cottonwoods. He knew the rear office window had a bad latch because I told him about it after we delivered the tack. His face tightened with shame. I pushed the frame up. He reached through and lifted the catch. I climbed in. Bell entered too? Yes. He took B-17 from the wall. What did you do? Carried it through the window. Then he made me fetch a short training surcingle from the open tack room. Emmett pushed away from the wall by half an inch, then stopped himself. Nightglass was in the main pen, Asa continued. Mr. Bell opened the lane gate and drove him into the narrow sorting run. I held the side gate and lantern. Was the horse roped? Nell asked. No. Bell crowded him with the gate and used the rails. Nightglass struck once and tried to turn, but the lane was too narrow. Asa's voice dropped. Mr. Bell laid the red pad over his back, left of center. He put the surcingle over it and pulled. Once? 3 times. The first pull made the horse jump. The second made him kick at his ribs. The third, Asa closed his eyes. The points came through. I saw blood on one. Ruth's fingers tightened around the lamp handle. Nell did not look away from Asa. Whose hands were on the strap? Mr. Bell's. Did you tighten it? No. Did you help restrain Nightglass? I held the gate shut. The words cost him more than the denial. I could have opened it. Could you? Nell asked. The latch was in your hand. Yes. Then say what is true. Bell tightened the strap. You kept the horse in the lane. Asa's eyes shone, but no tears fell. Yes. What happened next? Bell waited until Nightglass stopped striking. Then he took off the surcingle and pad. We put B-17 through the office window. The thread caught on the splinter and cut my thumb. Bell folded the pad again and hung it where it had been. I climbed out. He told me to ride back to Lantern Mesa and say nothing. But you did not return. I started to. Then I heard Nightglass hit the rail behind us. Asa's breath broke. I thought about how he looked when the strap pulled. I turned toward the freight sheds. Bell came after me as far as the old bridge, but I hid in the cut until dark. Emmett spoke for the first time. Why did Nightglass appear calm when we arrived? He wasn't calm when we left. He was standing in the far end of the pen, shaking. Maybe he heard your wagon before you saw him. Maybe he got too tired to fight. Nell knew horses could hide pain when danger remained near. Nightglass had done exactly that from the beginning. Still, she would not let assumption become testimony. Did you see Bell return to Lantern Mesa? No. Did you see him take papers from Juniper Gate? No. Did you take any papers? No. Anything else? Asa unwound the scarlet thread and laid it on Ruth's washstand. Only that. The room held the full shape of what had happened now. It was worse than finding the tacks. A hidden object could be blamed on accident, age, or an unseen hand. Asa's account supplied intent, access, action, and fear. It also supplied his own fault. Nell rose. You will need to repeat this before someone authorized to take your statement. Asa's face drained. The sheriff? Justice Haskell first. Bell will not be in the room. Will you tell him I was forced? I will tell him what I heard. You must tell him what happened. Will you ask him not to jail me? No. The word startled Emmett, though he concealed it quickly. Nell continued. I will ask that your age, Bell's threat, and Bell's hand on the strap be recorded. I will not promise an outcome I do not control. Asa stared at the floor. Then he nodded. All right. Justice Haskell received them after breakfast on September 5th. His office stood between the feed store and the sheriff's room, plain except for a desk, 2 chairs, and shelves of county papers. Belle was not admitted. Ruth remained as witness. Nell waited outside while Asa gave his account in his own order, with Haskell stopping only to clarify names, times, and places. When the boy finished, the justice read the statement back line by line. Asa corrected one detail. Belle had used 3 pulls on the surcingle, not 2. Then he signed with an unsteady hand. "This is a sworn statement," Haskell said. "It is not a promise that no consequence follows." "I know," Asa answered. "Do you make it freely?" Asa glanced once toward the open doorway where Nell waited. "I make it because it happened." By noon, Hugh arrived from Juniper Gate in the light wagon. His shoulder no longer required binding, though he still favored it when lifting. He brought the original B-17 receipt, the office key, Nell's spacing notes, a plain drawing of the rear window, and a wooden saddle stand from the tack room. He also carried a clean gray blanket and an ordinary ranch pad for comparison. Ruth unlocked her cupboard with Nell and Haskell present. B-17 lay exactly as she had stored it. Canvas wrapped around the edges, keeper visible, hem open. 4 tacks still sewn beneath the scarlet felt. No one folded or pressed it. "We need 1 public sequence," Nell said. "Not 10 arguments." She placed the objects in order across Haskell's desk. First, the receipt shows Belle delivered B-17. Second, Hugh confirms the office door stayed locked and the key never left him. Third, the window and scarlet fiber show another route. Fourth, Asa states who used that route and whose hands tightened the strap. Fifth, a buyer may confirm Belle insisted on that exact pad. Last, we place the pad on wood and apply ordinary pressure. Hugh glanced at the stand. "No horse, no horse." Emmett stood beside the window listening rather than directing. "May I tell the Green River buyers Asa has made a sworn statement?" he asked. Nell considered the question. "Tell them a statement exists and that Haskell will hear Belle's claim. Do not tell them what Asa said before Haskell permits it." Agreed. A clerk entered carrying 2 folded papers. Belle had filed his breach demand and accused Asa of stealing inspection tack and business records. Haskell read both, then placed them beside Asa's statement. "Belle wants his claim heard on the 7th. He says he will bring the Green River buyer." "Then the 7th," Nell said. Outside the office, the afternoon light lay hard across Lantern Mesa. Emmett paused beside her without reaching. The public hearing could still fail. Asa could lose courage. Belle could persuade the buyers that a frightened boy had invented the story to escape theft. Nell turned her right hand palm upward. Emmett saw the invitation and placed his hand in hers. She closed her fingers around his, not a rescue. A partnership entered with both people awake to the cost. Across the street, Cyrus Bell stepped down from the livery porch beside the older Green River buyer. His gaze dropped to their joined hands, then rose to Nell's face. Cyrus Bell saw their joined hands 2 days before the hearing, and by September 7th he had found a new name for them. "A husband and wife rehearsing testimony," he said, as Nell entered the Lantern Mesa stockyard. Justice Haskell stood beside the empty demonstration pen with a ledger under one arm. The county sheriff waited near the gate. Ruth Kersey carried B-17 wrapped in plain canvas, the stamped keeper visible and the opened hem untouched. Hugh Larkin brought the original receipt, the office key, and the drawing of Juniper Gate's rear window. Asa Pritchard stood apart from them in a clean borrowed shirt, pale but upright. Nightglass remained 16 miles away in the quiet North Penn. No horse would enter this yard to prove what Payne had done. The older Green River buyer waited beside 2 ranchers and a representative from a freight company. Emmett took his place behind Nell rather than beside the evidence table. Close enough to act, far enough not to claim her work. Belle glanced toward the empty pen. "Where is the stallion?" "At Juniper Gate," Nell said. "Then this is not a horse showing." "No," Haskell answered. "It is a hearing on your immediate claim against Juniper Gate and a taking of sworn statements concerning the disputed tack. It is not a criminal trial. No one standing here will pretend otherwise." Belle's gaze hardened. "My contract was breached. The rancher admits it." "The contract is one matter," Haskell said. "How the horse came to be injured is another. I will hear both before deciding whether your claim deserves any immediate enforcement and whether the papers should go forward." Belle swept one hand toward the gathering. In a stockyard, you demanded a public demonstration. Mrs. Varden refused to place the horse under pressure. This ground gives us room for the stand and witnesses. It also gives the sheriff room to remove any man who mistakes volume for proof. The sheriff rested a hand on the top rail. Bell said nothing more. Haskell asked Ruth to unwrap B-17. She opened the canvas without touching the felt. The scarlet pad lay flat on the table. Keeper stamp B-17, hem open, 4 copper tack heads visible within the layers. When did you receive this object? Haskell asked. September 3rd after sunset. From whom? Nell Tarrant Varden. Condition? Wrapped as it is now. Hem open, tacks sewn inside. Keeper and number visible. Has it left your locked cupboard? Only once in your office on September 5th, with Mrs. Varden and you present. I returned it immediately and locked it again. The key remained with me. Bell folded his arms. A friend's cupboard is not neutral custody. Ruth turned her head toward him. You have eaten at my table twice and paid late both times. I am no one's friend for free. A low sound passed through the ranchers and died when Haskell raised one finger. Hugh placed the receipt beside the pad. Read the number, Haskell said. Hugh did, and the added condition. Hugh read Emmett's written line requiring Nell's approval before any horse war supplied tack. Bell's signature stood beneath it. Did the office door remain locked after B-17 was placed inside? Haskell asked. Yes, Hugh said. The only key stayed in my vest. I slept with it there. Could the office be entered another way? Hugh's shame showed in the set of his mouth. The rear window latch was bent in spring. It could be lifted if the frame was pushed upward. I knew it did not seat clean. I did not know anyone meant to use it. When did you discover signs of entry? September 1st. Dust wiped from the sill, fresh scrape beneath the latch, scarlet fiber caught on a splinter, boot scuff below the window. The sorting lane gate tied with a knot I do not use. Bell spoke before Haskell asked. A poor latch and a different knot prove nothing about me. By themselves, no, Nell said. That is why they are not standing alone. Ace's name was called. He walked to the table without looking toward Bell. Haskell reminded him that his statement had been taken under oath, and that he was to say only what he saw, heard, or did. Asa placed his right hand on the Bible Haskell had brought from his office. His voice failed on the first word. Nell did not prompt him. Emmett did not move. Asa began again. He told them Bell had tested B-17 beneath a saddle tree weighted with grain sacks. He told them Bell ordered him to keep the pad folded. He told them Bell threatened to accuse him of stealing tack and money. Then he described the ride by the ranch cutoff, the warped rear window, the narrow sorting lane, and night glass trapped between rails. Who placed the pad on the horse? Haskell asked. Mr. Bell. Who tightened the surcingle, Mr. Bell? Did you assist? Ace's face tightened. I held the side gate shut and the lantern up. Could you have opened the gate? Yes. Did you? No. Bell stepped forward. The boy lies to save himself. The sheriff shifted between him and Asa. Stay where you are. Bell stopped. Haskell continued. What happened when the strap tightened? Nightglass jumped at the first pull, kicked at his ribs on the second. On the third, the points came through. Asa swallowed. I saw blood on one. What happened to the pad? Mr. Bell removed it. I carried it back through the window. The thread caught my thumb on the sill. He folded it and hung it where it had been. Did you steal papers? No. Did you see Mr. Bell take papers? No. Bell's mouth curved. Then we have a frightened boy confessing to entering private property, handling my tack and restraining the horse. Nothing more. The older buyer spoke from beside the rail. You told me the Juniper Gate stallion must be shown in the exact pad you supplied. Bell turned. Common equipment prevents excuses. You refused their own tack before the horse was injured, because buyers expect consistency. You also told me the pad had been tested. Bell's answer came too fast, for fit. Haskell looked toward Nell. Show us what can be shown without using an animal. Hugh carried the wooden saddle stand into the empty pen. The sheriff examined its boards, the clean gray blanket, the ordinary ranch pad, the saddle, and the cinch. The older buyer inspected them after him. Nell placed the ordinary pad over the blanket, settled the saddle, and tightened the cinch to a firm working pressure. Nothing marked the gray wool. She loosened it and removed the tack. Ruth carried B-17 to the stand. Nell positioned it without pressing the open hem. The sheriff checked beneath the pad before the saddle went down. Nothing lay between felt and blanket. Bell remained outside the pen. "You have already cut the object apart," he called. "Enough," Haskell said. Nell lowered the saddle and drew the cinch once. The felt compressed. Nothing appeared. Bell smiled. "There is your trick." Nell did not answer. She drew the cinch to the same ordinary firmness used on the first pad. 4 copper points rose through the scarlet felt and pricked into the gray blanket in a straight line. One pushed far enough to catch a thread of wool. No one cheered. The proof did not need noise. The older buyer entered the pen and bent close without touching. 4, he said. Hugh placed Nell's spacing notes beside the stand. Same count. Same line as the wounds. Consistent with them, Nell corrected. Bell vaulted the lower rail. "That pad is mine." The sheriff blocked him. "Step back." It was delivered for inspection. "She has no right." Bell reached around the sheriff for the canvas. The officer caught his wrist. "Step back." Bell jerked free and seized one corner of B-17. A tack tore through the gray blanket as the pad shifted. Nell released the cinch at once. Bell shoved the sheriff's arm. The next movement ended with Bell against the rail, one arm pinned behind him, and dust on the knees of his dark trousers. "You are being held for disturbing this hearing, attempting to seize the disputed object, and refusing lawful direction," the sheriff said. "Not for the fraud complaint. Do you understand?" Bell cursed him instead of answering. Haskell closed his ledger. "Mr. Bell's request for immediate enforcement of the breach claim is denied. The contract dispute may proceed through the proper court if he chooses. The sworn complaint concerning fraud and deliberate harm tied to the agreement will be sent forward with copies of the statements." He indicated the table. B-17, the marked gray blanket, the receipt copy, and Asa Pritchard's statement are to remain under official custody until released. The original receipt will be copied and returned to Juniper Gate unless required by the court. Bell twisted toward the buyer. "You know what this costs if every ranch wife can invent an injury and drag a broker before a justice." The buyer regarded him without anger. "I know what it costs when a broker insists on tack he has already tested under weight." He turned to Emmett. "I will not send another horse lot through Bell. When your horses are sound, I will consider them directly." Then he looked at Nell. "Bring the stallion tomorrow, in hand only. No pad. No." The word came before relief could weaken it. "His wounds are closing, not healed. He has traveled nowhere since they were found. He will not come here for your certainty." The buyer's brows rose. Emmett stepped beside Nell. "Her refusal outranks my financial need." Several ranchers heard him. None applauded. One older man only nodded, as if revising a private measure of Juniper Gate. The buyer studied Nell a moment longer. "Then contact me when you judge a horse ready. Not before." Bell was led toward the sheriff's office, still protesting that the pad belonged to him. Buyers and ranchers left in small groups, carrying no contract and no miracle for Juniper Gate. Ruth followed Haskell and the evidence to the office. Hugh went to arrange the wagon. Ussa remained near the empty pen until the sheriff told him his statement was complete for the day. When the yard had nearly cleared, Nell stood beside the wooden saddle stand. 4 small holes marked the gray blanket. Emmett stopped at arm's length. "May I hold you?" She stepped into him. His arms closed around her, firm and controlled. Nell rested her cheek against his chest and felt the breath he had kept measured through the hearing leave him. When she lifted her face, he waited. She kissed him first. This kiss carried more than the brief one beside the wool shed. Emmett answered without taking command of it, one hand at her waist, the other steady between her shoulders. Warmth deepened, then stopped when Nell drew back. He released her at once. "The deposit is gone," he said. "Bell's immediate claim is stopped, not erased. The banknote remains. I may have to sell part of Juniper Gate." Nell kept one hand on his coat. "Which part did you intend to decide without me?" "The southern pasture," Emmett said. Nell kept her hand on his coat. Around them, the Lantern Mesa stockyard had nearly emptied. 4 small holes remained in the gray blanket stretched over the wooden stand, and across the road the sheriff's door had closed behind Cyrus Bell. "The same winter range you said would make next year harder," she said. "Yes." "How much of it?" Enough to meet the autumn note if the bank will not extend the balance. And how many cattle can Juniper Gate carry without it? Emmett glanced toward the road, where the last green river wagon was disappearing beneath a veil of dust. Enough to keep the ranch alive. Not enough to keep the same wages, horse numbers, and winter margin. Then we do not sell it today. The bank does not wait on pride. Neither does land return because fear made the decision quickly. He met her eyes. What do you propose? The question came without challenge. No hidden answer waiting beneath it. Nell released his coat. Take me home. Show me the books. Then let me decide whether I am speaking as your trainer, your wife, or both. Juniper Gate is still home. That depends on what happens when we reach it. Emmett nodded once. Then we begin there. They returned to the ranch the next morning, with Hugh driving the light wagon, and Ruth Kersey following in her own rig. Ruth brought 3 young horses tied behind her. A rangy, chestnut filly that resisted any hand near her ears, a gray gelding that planted himself beside loading ramps, and a brown colt with a white heel that trembled whenever metal struck leather. I am not bringing charity, Ruth said, before anyone could mistake her meaning. She handed Nell a folded paper. I pay feed and a fair daily rate. When they sell, you take 1/4 of anything above the values written here. Nell read each figure. I will not guarantee a result. I am paying for honest work, not miracles. Hugh arrived from the barn with 2 neighboring ranchers. One owned a buckskin mare that struck when bridled. The other had 2 geldings rejected by a freight buyer for bolting at wagon noise. Both men had heard what happened at Lantern Mesa. Neither asked Nell to tame anything by sundown. I will examine them, she said. That is not a promise they can be made safe. The older rancher held out a deposit. Nell waited until Emmett brought the receipt book. Her name went on the line describing the work. Emmett's name went beneath hers as ranch owner. No one signed for a result. By noon, 6 outside horses stood on a provisional list. None belonged to Bell. None required nightglass to prove their worth. Inside the ranch office, Emmett opened the account books. Nell sat across from him with Ruth and Hugh near the wall as witnesses to the discussion but not its owners. The autumn note remained heavy. The lost deposit hurt. Bell's immediate claim had been stopped, not erased. Yet the numbers did not require a frightened sale if Juniper Gate changed the work it promised. Sell 5 ordinary cattle before winter, Nell said. Not the breeding stock. Reduce the commercial horse lot. No more 12-horse promises. Emmett studied the figures. That leaves little room. Then we stop pretending one large buyer created safety. We take fewer horses. We write each limit. We charge for evaluation, daily work, and feed. Sale profit comes after that if it comes. Hugh folded his arms. We would need another hand by winter. Not yet, Nell said. You teach Tom the quiet work. I take only what the pens can hold without crowding. Emmett turned a page. The banknote can be kept current. Barely, Hugh said. Barely is not the same as lost, Ruth answered. And no one here has offered easy. Emmett looked at Nell. The southern pasture stays, for now. For now, he agreed. Over the next 6 days, the plan became work rather than hope. Hugh posted each outside horse's owner, feed charge, handling limit, and daily rate beside its stall. Nell evaluated the chestnut filly without touching her ears and discovered an old scar beneath the forelock where a rough crown piece had rubbed. The gray gelding crossed half a loading ramp when no one tried to pull him farther. The brown colt learned that a buckle could strike leather once and then stop. No buyer appeared with a miraculous contract. The bank did not forgive $1. Juniper Gate simply began earning money in smaller, honest pieces. Nightglass improved more slowly. The swelling beneath his left ribs softened. He accepted the white ash brush along his neck and shoulder, then over the upper line of his back. Nell never brought a blanket into the pen. When he tensed, she stepped away. When he lowered his head, she ended before fatigue became submission. On the 7th evening after the hearing, Emmett asked Nell to meet him in the office after supper. A lamp burned beside 3 documents. Ruth and Hugh were already there. You called witnesses, Nell said. I called people neither of us owns. Emmett pushed the first paper toward her. It set wages for every day she evaluated or trained an outside horse. The second granted her a share of profits from horses accepted under her program. The third required both their signatures on every future horse contract at Juniper Gate. A fourth line stated that wages already earned remained Nell's whether she stayed in the marriage or left it. "This is not a deed to the ranch," Emmett said. "It is not meant to pretend the territorial law is simpler than it is. It is my written agreement, witnessed here, that your work and your money do not disappear inside my name." Nell read every word twice. "And if I leave the work, your share ends when the horses already accepted are finished. What you earned remains yours. If I leave the house again, the same. If fear enters this room and the answer I give costs land." Emmett rested both hands on the far edge of the desk. He did not reach across it. "I tell you the cost. I ask what you choose. I do not use the ranch, the marriage, or money to make your refusal smaller." Hugh shifted his weight but did not look away. Ruth's expression remained unreadable. Nell touched the line requiring both signatures. "One copy stays in the ranch ledger. One copy goes in your locked trunk," Emmett said. Ruth and Hugh witnessed both. "And the horses? No animal leaves these pens under a promise you did not make." Nell took up the pencil. She signed. Emmett signed beneath her. Ruth and Hugh added their names as witnesses. When the papers had been copied and folded, Hugh carried one set to the ledger cabinet. Ruth handed the other to Nell. Then both witnesses left without turning a private choice into public entertainment. Emmett remained behind the desk. "There is one more thing," he said. Nell waited. His voice lowered, but it did not weaken. "I love you. I loved your courage first. I love you when you are working, and I love you when you put the brush down." The words reached the place in her that praise had always missed. Men had thanked her after a horse loaded, stood, carried, endured. Gratitude had often arrived with another task behind it. Emmett offered no task. "I love you," Nell said. His breath left him slowly. She continued before relief could make either of them careless. "That does not erase what happened. I know. I will not remain where my judgment becomes decoration. Under pressure, it will not. You cannot promise never to be afraid." "No, then keep the promise you wrote." "I will." Nell walked around the desk. He stood but did not close the distance. She raised both hands to his face and kissed him because she chose to, not because the ranch had survived or Belle had fallen. Emmett's hands settled at her waist, only after she leaned nearer. The kiss deepened, warm and unhurried, then ended when Nell rested her forehead against his. "My room or yours?" he asked. "Ours," she said. She went upstairs first. At the bedroom doorway, Nell placed the white ash brush on the small table outside. Work could wait until morning. Emmett entered only after she held out her hand, and the lamp went dark behind them. Later, beneath a sky sharpened by September stars, they stood on the porch overlooking the north pen. Nightglass circled once, tested the ground with one forehoof, then folded his legs beneath him. He settled upright in the dust with Nell and Emmett in sight. He did not lie flat, not yet. No one moved closer. No one asked for more. 11 months later, Nell woke before dawn and did not rise. Work already moved beyond the open window. A bucket struck the pump. A gate hinge complained. Hugh Larkin's voice carried from the training yard, firm enough to be heard and measured enough not to frighten the chestnut mare circling him. "Stop before she has to run," he told a new hand. "If fear has to shout, you waited too long." Nell remained beneath the sheet and listened. Once, every sound of labor had pulled her upright before thought. A horse waiting meant usefulness waiting, and usefulness had always felt too close to permission to stay. Juniper Gate no longer asked that price. Outside, Nightglass stood in the north pen beneath the first gray light of August 1889. His black coat held a faint blue shine where dawn touched it. He had seen Nell at the window. He did not pace, call, or demand her attention. He returned to his hay. The bedroom door opened. Emmett entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. Dust marked his boots, and a fresh tear showed at the cuff of his work shirt. "The southern fence?" Nell asked. "Still standing." He set her cup on the small table. "A steer objected to my inspection. Did the steer win?" He kept his opinion. Emmett sat on the edge of the bed and drank without mentioning the 3 horses scheduled for work that morning. He did not tell her the account book lay open in the office, or that a rider had arrived before sunrise. The quiet was not an accident. It was something he practiced. Nell pushed herself upright and accepted the coffee. You could have woken me, I could have. You did not. No. The answer carried no lesson and asked for no gratitude. That was why she trusted it. Through the window, Juniper Gate looked smaller than the ranch Belle had once tried to control and stronger for admitting its limits. 6 outside horses occupied the training pens. Each stall bore the owner's name, feed charge, handling limits, and agreed daily rate. No paper promised that an animal would be made safe by a certain date. No buyer supplied tack without inspection. No contract carried only one signature. The banknote had been kept current through winter, and again after spring shipping. It had not vanished. Neither had the southern pasture. 5 cattle sold early. Ruth Kersey's 3 young horses brought modest profit, and neighboring ranchers paid for honest evaluation, whether a horse reached market or not. Some months left little margin. None required night glass to suffer for a crowd. Emmett nodded toward the folded letter on the washstand. Green River Station sent word for Asa. Good word? The saddler has raised his wages. Asa Pritchard now worked 6 days a week at a rail yard harness shop under terms written before Justice Haskell. He had begun by sweeping floors, sorting rivets, and oiling leather. By spring, he repaired freight traces without supervision. Ruth said he still unfolded every pad before putting it on a shelf. Some memories did not disappear. They became rules a person could choose. Nell sipped the coffee. Anything from Lantern Mesa. The complaint remains on the county record. Another hearing was postponed. Belle? Alive. Still arguing. Emmett's mouth tightened. 2 Green River buyers have taken his name off their lists. The freight company did the same. Cyrus Bell had not vanished behind a prison wall or confessed beneath public shame. The law moved more slowly than anger wished, but sworn statements remained. B-17 remained under official custody, its open hem and 4 copper tacks preserved with the marked gray blanket and copies of the receipt. Bell no longer decided which ranchers reached every buyer between Lantern Mesa and the railroad. His power had not ended in one dramatic blow. It had narrowed each time a man asked to see the tack, read the paper, or hear the witness himself. Nell preferred that kind of consequence. It lasted because others had learned to look. Hugh says he can manage the yard until dinner, Emmett said. Did he say that? He told me to keep you away from the chestnut mare because he wants to solve the ear trouble himself. Nell set down her cup. That sounds dangerously like confidence. I warned him. She dressed without hurry. The white ash brush no longer waited beside the bed. It hung on a peg near Nightglass's pen, where work belonged. The handle had darkened beneath years of use, but JT remained visible near the place her thumb rested. Her father had been dead 6 years now. The tool still fit her hand. It no longer had to follow her into every room. By the time Nell crossed the yard, sunlight had reached the upper rails. Hugh stood outside the training pen, with one hand resting on the gate. His old shoulder injury had left no more than a faint stiffness in cold weather. Inside, the chestnut mare lifted her head, each time the new hand raised a bridle. You're asking with both hands, Hugh said. Ask with one. Let the other hand stay where she can see it. He noticed Nell touched 2 fingers to his hat and continued teaching. He did not call her over to prove he respected her. He respected her enough to use what she had taught him. Near the wagon ramp, Ruth's gray gelding loaded with only a loose lead. The brown colt with the white heel had sold in May to a physician who wanted a steady buggy horse. Ruth divided the profit according to the written agreement and sent another mare the following week. Nothing at Juniper Gate grew quickly. That had become part of its value. Emmett carried their empty cups toward the house. Nell caught his torn sleeve as he passed. Come sit with me. He changed direction without asking where. They crossed to the north pen. Nightglass stood under the shade lean-to, his left side visible to them. The puncture marks had healed into 4 small scars beneath the hair. He accepted a plain blanket now, though only after months of loose cloth, pauses, and the freedom to step away. He had never been ridden for a buyer. No one at Juniper Gate had decided his worth depended on carrying a man. Nell climbed onto the second rail. Emmett steadied the board with one hand but did not touch her. When she reached the top, he offered his palm. She took it and sat beside him. Their shoulders met. The contact carried no question anymore. Below them, Nightglass approached the rail and breathed across the worn bristles of the ash brush. Nell left it where it lay. 3 horses waiting, Emmett said. An account book open on your desk. Hugh pretending he does not want your advice. A demanding morning. We could begin it. Nell rested both hands on the rail. We could. Neither moved. Wind passed through the sage beyond the cattle pasture. A meadowlark called from the dry grass. Nightglass walked into the open sun, circled once, and lowered his nose toward the ground. He bent one foreleg. Emmett became still beside her. The stallion lowered himself to his knees, folded his hind quarters, and settled into the dust. He had rested that way before, upright and watchful. This time his body rolled farther. His neck stretched along the earth, his legs loosened. One deep breath moved through his ribs, then another. Nightglass lay flat in the morning light with both humans above him. His eyes closed. Nell placed her hand over Emmett's. His fingers turned beneath hers and held without tightening. He kissed her temple. No one called Hugh. No one fetched a buyer. No one reached for the brush. They sat above the sleeping horse, while work waited beyond the fence, certain now that waiting did not mean loss. By then, no one at Juniper Gate mistook exhaustion for obedience or rest for surrender.